Hello, welcome to the February 14th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I basically serve as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. I'm going to mute my other computer. Bear with me just for a second. All right, so I work for Yamaha Corporation of America primarily as a Steinberg product specialist, and I'm the host of the live stream. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. If you're watching the live stream live, please feel free to tell us who you are and where you're from. And even if you're watching it afterwards, you feel free to do that in the comments field. It's always fascinating to see different people from all across the world. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply enter your question in the chat field. When entering your questions in the chat field, if you could specify which version of Cubase are you running. Are you running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, Pro? What version number? Is it version 10, 11, 12? Are you on Mac or PC? That information is often helpful. Realize that when asking questions, I may not be able to get a real-time response to the particular questions, but we'll try to go chronologically. So if we could avoid asking the same questions over and over again, if you have a question you don't see an immediate response, if we could try to avoid repeating the question, that would be helpful. It just kind of slows down the whole process. If you want to see questions, we should have all of the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field, and with timestamps so you could navigate directly to particular questions. If you wanted to search for questions that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, or if you wanted to, and we have Jan from Stockholm is kind enough to create that website for us. And I think it's over 24,000 questions. We want to give a special thanks also to Agent K and Jazz Dude that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do it to make it a better community. And also a special thanks to Jazz Dude for all of his work with dealing with the Cubase Nation Discord. It's a great service to the Steinberg community. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so the first question we have is from Vishnu from India. When I try to color my tracks from track panel on the side, sometimes it does not work. Is it a bug, or is it that I'm doing something wrong? So often what happens if we have like multiple events on a particular track, if we have an event selected, so let's say I have an event selected and I want to color, let's say, these tracks to a different color. I would grab my color tool and say I want all these tracks to be red. And it doesn't work because the event has priority. So the event turned red. So what you have to make sure if you want to colorize tracks is to make sure that no events are selected. And you can do that by clicking on an empty space in the project window. And now when we get to our color tool, you could just colorize the particular track so you can see the selected tracks will now all change colors, but make sure that you don't have a particular event selected. So make sure an event is not selected. If an event is selected, that'll get priority over the tracks. All right, so we have a question from Gadi Zana. I have a few plugins that are set up to do oversampling. I know it's heavy on the CPU. Can it affect the final export somehow? Because in real time, it's hard to work with high oversampling. So if you have a plugin that you want to activate for high oversampling, what you could do is just simply activate that particular function before doing the export audio mixdown. So if you wanted to have, everything kind of function as expected, and let's say you're not running it in oversampling mode, just simply activate the oversampling before you do the export audio mixdown. At that point, The rendering time may be a little bit longer, but it will have the benefit of the quality of the oversampling, but it may sound slightly different than what you're hearing with it disengaged. But, there's no consequence other than the length of the potential render, and it may be like a second longer depending on the scenario, but that would be the only downside to it. So I would suggest just to enable the oversampling right before mix down, and that would be taken into account. All right, so we see a question also from it says, when doing multiple audio mix down export, the elements that were rendered on the project are exported dry without send effects. And it says FR channels and without group channels as well. Why? It really depends on what settings that you have. So let's say I have this particular track. I have like a vocal, and this vocal is going through, let's say, the reverb. I started losing so come over here. Let's get to sends. All right, so if I wanted to have these exported with the effects when we do kind of a multi-export, we go to our file. Let's say we go to export audio mixdown. We're going to activate our multiple. And so let's say I want to go to my vocals. And as I go to my vocals here, we'll see the effects. And then instead of having this by default, that'll be set to dry. But if I say, okay, let's do our group and send effects. So as we do this now, I will export the audio. And that will include, and I think I set it to, let me just do it for all of the events here. So, and now that we go to export audio mixdown, so we're just going to choose our vocal, and we can do this for multiple files at the same time. We'll say export. All right, so here's our rendered file. We'll solo it and listen to it, and we should have the effects. So that's how you can do it. So once you're in the export audio mixdown, after selecting multiple, under the effects, make sure that you choose group and sends. And then those effects will automatically be rendered into the particular audio file just like that. All right, so we see wonderful to see Mark Winslow from Aloha saying aloha from Hawaii. So all right, so you see a question. Hi, Greg. Could you give some examples of the differences between chord plus scale, and scale for MIDI tracks following the chord track? Okay, so let's say we have a chord track, and I'll just paint in some particular chords here. So let's say we'll do something, and we'll put it into D major. So let's say, okay, we'll come here. Okay. So we'll make it pretty obvious that we're going to be in D major here. Okay, so now we'll come over here, we'll show our scale. So it's determined here that we're going to be in D major. So when we go to a particular chord, and let's say if we go to our track, let me just clear my throat. Yeah. So we can go to our MIDI track. So let's say we come over here, we'll go to our chord, And then we have where, we can say follow the chord track, and then we'll have, different settings for chords versus scale. So let's say we'll just come over. So when you have it set to follow the chords, what it's going to do is only have the particular chords. It's only going to follow the notes within the chord. So if we've determined that we're in the key of D major, if I played, let's say, an E flat note, and we have scale selected, we could have that note automatically go either to D or to E, but not E flat, because we're following within the scale that's been determined by the chord track. So you could have chords and scales, or only scales. So if you wanted to play only within the scale, so like in D major, we can think of that as D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. So it would be those particular notes. Now, if I choose only scale, if I choose only chords, at this time it would only do D, F sharp, A, in G, B, D, A, C sharp, E. So, but if we have like leading tones within a particular element, we would probably want it to set it to chords and scales. So that way it could emphasize the chord tones, but it could also allow for notes that are within the key of the particular project as well. All right, so we see Benny checking in. He's at home sick, so we hope you get well soon. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index wishing everyone a happy Valentine's Day from Stockholm. Nice sentiment. All right, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue, and he asks, when I record a track and duplicate that track with all the settings remaining the same and make a fresh recording on it, all levels remain the same, but the waveforms change in level. Why is that? So I'll go ahead and just do a quick recording here. So let's say I will add this to a group track. So we'll just do a quick recording. So I'll add a group channel to that. We'll make it a stereo group. And let's add an audio track, and we'll set that group as our input. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll record this, and I'll just punch out. So do a quick recording. Okay, so record a track and then duplicate track with all settings remaining. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate the track here. Okay, and all the settings are there. Make a fresh recording on it. All levels remain the same, but the waveforms change in level. Why is that? All right, so let's take a look at our waveform view, and I will go ahead and re-record on top of our recording here. So it looks like and when you say the levels remain the same, but the waveforms change in level. So it looks like the waveforms here, if I take these two, so this was the new recording over the previous recording, they look pretty similar to me. So I'm not sure if maybe if you had clip gain enabled on the track. So let's say if I come here and if I adjusted like the clip gain, and then let's duplicate the track, and now I will record onto this track. So let's make this larger so we can see clip gain. And now if I record, so here we can see our volume is at 0 dB. And if we look at this one, we have 11.18 dB. So maybe if you have clip gain, that the clip gain on the new recording, because it's a different event, is not carried over. So maybe that's it, Dallas. Maybe you could let us know if you've done any clip gain adjustments. But it seems like it's the same unless you did that. All right, wonderful to see David Griffiths from sunny Wales in the UK and Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. We have Soren checking in from Sweden. Wishing everyone a happy Valentine. We have Arif B checking in from Holland. All right, and Trond, great to see you from Norway. And Mayron checking in from Manchester, UK. We have Peter from Montreal. So he's just how do you convert live audio recording into MIDI data? So, how we could do it currently is, we could take the drums and be able to convert the drums, using hit points. So if I wanted to, let's just jump to this project. But for audio, if it's going to have chords in it, it's not necessarily going to be set up to, extract MIDI from chords. There's some programs that are doing it, but there's all still a little shaky on it. But if we wanted to use like a monophonic source, what we could do is, let's say if I double click, we'll go into our Vari Audio editor. So if we enable Vari Audio, we could see all like our baseline here. If we go to functions, we could just come over here and choose extract MIDI. We'll put onto a new MIDI track. So we could convert that, but if it's going to be chords, it's not, it's not really as easy to convert that into MIDI, so, and if you have everything kind of pieced together, it's not really designed for that as well. Like, you might be able to split it, but there's going to be some artifacts. If you wanted to do drums, we could go to, let's say, our hit points in their sample editor, and we could adjust our threshold. And I could take like the drum parts. If we go to create, we could say, let's create MIDI notes. So for drums where it's not going to be necessarily changing pitch, we could automatically retain the dynamics if we wanted to, or fixed velocity. We could choose our first selected track or a new MIDI track and come over. And now we could have like our drum hits that are automatically being translated into MIDI as well. But for the most part, you could do monophonic sources or like percussive drum hits, but not necessarily like, oh, let's just magically turn it all into MIDI. So. All right, so we have Command Beats checking in from Croatia. We have Paul also checking in from Manchester, UK. All right, and we have Ramontes checking in from London. Royal Vinay Official from India, thanks for being on. We have Jay from Secret Studios. I believe he's in Connecticut. All right, wonderful to see Sir Robert from Atlanta, Georgia. All right, and we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. All right, so we have a question from Paul Groupside. How can I use Cubase Pro to tune a piece of music that's been imported from audio cassette that ran too fast and made the music sharp? And then how can I use Cubase to identify the chords and melody? Okay, so if we have a piece of audio, So I'll just do, let's say, new project. Just import. All right, so let's say we have an audio file here. And if we say that this came in from a cassette and maybe it's a little fast, what we could do is we're going to put it into, we have different algorithms. And one of the algorithms is specifically for this called tape. So at this point, we want to put it into tape algorithm and put it into musical mode. So if we don't know kind of what the tempo is, as I adjust the tempo of it down, it's going to change the pitch just like analog tape. So if I speed the tempo up, this is like a very speed on an analog recording machine. And you could go, I'm just doing 1 beats per minute different, but I could say, okay, let's get a 119.5 and get my subtle changes. So once we put it into musical mode, select the event, put it into elastic tape, and so that's how we could repitch the audio to the correct pitch. Now, if I wanted to extract the melody, just make sure I read this. Identify the chords and melody. So let's say I have a chord track. I'm going to go to the chord track right here. And I drag the audio to the chord track, and it's going to do its analysis. All right, so now we could see kind of our chords that are laid out for us. We can see it looks like the band drop tuned. And let's say if we want to extract the melody, so add a chord track, drag the audio down to the chord track, and that's really all you'd have to do for that. And if we select the event, we could go into extensions. So with Cubase 11 and Cubase 12, I think the artist and pro versions, I know definitely in the pro, we could go to spectral layers. And what this is going to allow us to do is kind of edit your different elements kind of in a spectral domain. So what we could look at our audio file. Okay, and once we do this, we could see all of our audio kind of laid out in kind of a typical, instead of our waveforms, we could see kind of the low notes as well as the high notes. And one of the things that you get with spectral layers, one that comes with it, is if you go to layer, you could just say, let's unmix stems. And, we could now just come over here in spectral layers 1, we could just take the vocals and we'll hit OK. So I'll just come over. So get a layer, unmix stems. And what this is almost doing is basically unbaking the cake and taking the eggs out and putting it in its shell. If we're going to make a baking analogy. We just says doing all sorts of wonderful artificial intelligence to make this magic happen. So once again, just to review as we're watching this, so add a chord track, drag the audio event to the chord track. You'll see the chord track be created. And then if you wanted to figure out what the tempo of the original track is, you could select it and go to project and do tempo detection, and you could determine the tempo of the project as well. All right, almost done. And if you have the full version of spectral layers, you could take out drums, bass, piano, and other instruments and separate them. All right, so now as we play, and if I wanted to just solo the vocals, and if I just drag this to the project window, I could just have the vocal isolated. So the vocal is too loud in the mix. Or if you wanted the vocal to be louder. So that's some of the things that you could do. So, you know, again, just come over and add a chord track, drag the audio down, go to the extensions and load up Spectral Layers 1, and then you're able to just extract the vocals, and then you could drag it right onto the timeline and have it automatically work just like that. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from question from Dallas LaRue. I'm trying to add samples from MediaBay to my ADSR sample manager, but I can't find where the MediaBay samples are located in the files on my PC. So they may not be they may be put into a kind of a collection so that you can use it within Cubase, but not as easily, may not be designed. But let's say if we go to our loops, here, one of the things that you could try is just to right click. Just try from one of let's say the large media bay. So let's say we'll come here to VST sound, and I want to go to analog techno. All right, and I think, with other content, so, with any content that you have, you could just simply, if it's, so the built-in content is going to be kind of, bundled together. But when we go to, let's say, documents here and if it's going to be other files, like, files that you've created, you could just come over to, let's say, projects. And let's say, okay, we'll go to this. And at this point, you could right click and say reveal in Finder. But some of those might be why you can't necessarily, you probably won't be able to do that with the particular content that comes with Cubase. Just because of, because we license it from third parties and to make sure that their work isn't spread around as much as part of the licensing agreement. All right. So we see Brian Sawyer checking in from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see my question. Please suggest the best free mixing and mastering plugin for Cubase Elements. So the first thing that I would always do with, something like a Cubase Elements is just to come over and, use the built-in channel strip can do, so much. So let's say if we go to our channel settings here. So anytime, we could do this on the master bus, but, realize that you're going to have, different compressors like tube compressors. You're going to have very sophisticated EQs. You could add stuff if you need de-essing or envelope shapers, if you needed saturation. So let's say I want magneto and I wanted to have like a maximizer or a brick wall limiter. We could just have all these different processing directly within the channel strip. These will also show up as other, so if we wanted to go to our dynamics and EQs, we could see these different functions, but you could do so much with kind of the included channel strip, especially within Cubase elements. If you master those things, they will serve you a long time and be very easy on your CPU as well with great results. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Uno Memento from Finland. Wishing everyone a happy Valentine's Day. All right, so we see from Simon asks, how can I make favorite folders with favorite VST instruments? Okay, so if we wanted to go there, we could go to your studio menu and let's go to VST plugin manager. So let's say, okay, I want to go to my VST instruments and we could create a collection. So we could say, I'm going to copy the current collector. I'll just make a new collection. All right, so we'll say empty and we'll call our collection Simon. Okay, and in this collection, I only want Hallian Sonic, Pad Shop, Retrolog, and Groove Agent SE. So when I go to add an instrument track, we say, okay, let's go to our instrument track. We can now see only those particular ones that we've set in our Simon collection. If I wanted to see my default collection, so you could just create your own plugin collections and organize it exactly how you want. And if you wanted to create folders, we could do that as well. So let's say we go back to our Simon preset here, and we will just say, let's click on a new folder. So let's say, okay, I want drum, and I want to throw Groove Agent in there, and let's throw Backbone in. So now you could just create your own plugin collections and have all of your favorites in there and just toggle back and forth if you want to see everything or you wanted to see your particular favorites. So every time that you go to access a particular plugin, you could choose what, so when you click here, you could just choose all of your VST plugin collections to easily navigate. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston on. Great to have Mark Rabin checking in from Montana. Glad you can make it today. All right, and we have Larry checking in from Brampton. All right, Cubase X says, evening, Greg. Thank you so much for these hangouts. I always learn so much. That's great. That's hopefully why we do them, so people could learn their tools better. All right, so we see, all right, from Jay asks, hi, Greg, I'm wondering if you'd be so kind as to demonstrate the best steps to select a non-project logical editor method to select all audio events within a project, and two, a non-project logical editor to select all audio events within a folder. So if it's all audio, you could just, if you do just a Control A, So, or if you, let's say if we had multiple audio file segments here, so let's say I have this, we could select all of our audio tracks. So let's say I have a chord track, let's say I have a MIDI track. I'm going to come and I'll just hold down my control or command key. And then we could do a select all on tracks, all on selected tracks. So you could do that if you have all of your audio tracks set up. And let's say if we have a folder, it's obviously easy to do using the Project Logical editor. So if you want to see that, I'd be happy to show that as well. But you specifically asked for non-logical editors. Let's say I want to select all. So, and it may be kind of the same thing to select all of the tracks and go to, select, go to edit, select all on selected tracks and do it like that. So if you have Project Logical editor, you could do it, but maybe the all unselected tracks would also work for you, Jay. You see from Command Beats, this is more complicated than rocket science. So, well, you could probably do, there's a lot more capabilities here than rocket science. So I'm not a rocket scientist, but my dad was. But, we have to remember that, Stevie Wonder runs Cubase and he's blind, so it can't be that hard. He is a smart guy, though. All right, Lucas asks, hey, Greg, I've been through all the event preferences and can't seem to find an option that allows me to change the opacity of selected event. All right, so let's say, we could do, so just for other people, if we come over to event display and we say audio, we could come over here. So we could say the event opacity, we could adjust. So if you wanted it to be like that, where these will all be kind of, almost translucent, we could do that, but it's not necessarily limited to the selected event. So I'll just come here. Let's put it back to our defaults. But let's say if we get to user interface, color scheme. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of change the opacity for if a track is selected. So we could do selected channel color brightness. So I think that's within the mix console. Yeah, but so it's kind of a global setting and not necessarily for the selected event. So, but let me know if I misunderstood. But I don't know of a way to set that. So it used to be that in Nuendo, like the frame would get selected and kind of, and then everyone complained that they wanted it like Cubase, so it was more obvious when an event was selected. So Nuendo has a preference where you could have the frame of the event get selected, but it was like a bit subtle and not as obvious, and everyone wanted it to work like Cubase, so they've added a preference in Nuendo, but that was never a feature in Cubase. And I see maybe a follow-up says I use a lighter gray as a background and event opacity is set to halfway, but whenever I select an event, it darkens the event where I can't see the waveforms. So one thing that you might be able to do is, let's say if we go to our event display, we can say waveform brightness, and this is just a follow-up. So now as we do this and we select an event, so, you could have kind of the waveforms be much brighter if you want it to do it that way. So maybe to get around a problem, come over to the waveform brightness and see, if that is set by default, then when you select, it may not be as, so when you say apply, we could see that. So that may help in that particular situation. So maybe try adjusting the waveform brightness. And thank you for the clarification on that. All right, so we see question, when I'm working on a track, then sometimes my output is quit by itself at random. How is it possible using Cubase 12.5 Pro? So let me know if there's, if you have any plugins. Like the one time I remember kind of going through a rabbit hole with something similar to this, and the person was using a plugin that was in demo mode, and after a certain amount of time, it just kind of turned off. Also, if you have, let me know if there's any plugins on the track, or if you experienced that with the track with no plugins or like no third-party plugins. If you notice that, sometimes, it could be, that's usually when I've kind of come across that. I remember kind of going down a rabbit hole trying to figure this out for someone, and it was a trial version of a plugin that would just turn off after like 30 minutes and wouldn't process or pass audio through the plugin. So if you could let me know if there's any plugins, or if you see that on tracks that are just using like, built-in plugins, that would be helpful. All right, John Costigan says, please whack the like button. It helps the Hangouts to keep going. Certainly does. So yeah, we always appreciate if you haven't subscribed to the channel. You could subscribe and hit the like button, and that does allow us to continue to offer this service so that you could watch it free and without any ads whatsoever. So that's always good. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me see if I can. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to add a new bass subcategory in Media Bay? 808, for example. So I think that the categories, like when we go to Media Bay, that some of these particular, I'll just do it from large. So let's say if we wanted to, so we had, let's say, a musical category, and we could come over here to set up that we could have. So let's say, if we wanted this to be so musical, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say we come over to All right, but I know one thing that you can do is if you, let me just say we'll come over here to presets and we'll look at, the one thing that you can do is if we see, if you click on the plus sign here, you could say attribute type text, and you could say base like 808, or we'll say 808 base. All right, and then we can make this into a yes, no, a number, or text. So now when we come to our categories, we could now just come over and we could use we could have our own user defined categories. So we can see 808 bass. So now if we wanted to search for 808 basses, at this point you could just do that. So it might be go to defined and then just simply add your categories, and then you could have that automatically show up as a particular category that you want defined. So if it's not there, you can go to the defined, click on the settings, and then add your particular category and be able to search by that. All right, so we see from Command Beats how to detect tempo. All right, so let's see if we have a project still open. All right, so if I want to detect tempo, I'll just all right, so let's say we have this particular project. All right. Here, I'll just do a different. Okay, so let's say we have our file here. Let you know. And if I wanted to detect tempo of that, if I don't erase it first, all you have to do is select it, go to project, and then go to tempo detection. We'll click on analyze. Let you know what I'm about and what is so where our tempo was before. Let you know what I'm about and what is so there's no real correlation with the tempo. And then after tempo detection, and that's would be all you'd have to do to detect tempo. So you could do the same process for a MIDI event or for an audio event. So select it, go to project, tempo detection. So not too rocket sciencey for me. Okay, so we have Ted Springman. Wonderful to see you on from Los Angeles. Say a drummer wants to measure his timing progress. Is there an audio quantized value to show how far off timing he was, or over time can he see improvement in those values? So I would just do a straight tempo detection, and and I think while this may not give a exact percentage, like, you've improved, 4% this week on this take versus, the take last week. I think that, this is a very enlightening thing for a drummer to see, kind of like what their tempo fluctuations are visually. It's like if you played, at that point, you could see, it's like, a lot of vocalists I've known have improved their actual pitch, when they started doing editing of their pitch, and they could see exactly, they would have a concept of what visually it was going to look like within certain vocal phrasing. So, so I've seen singers that have improved their personal vocal qualities. And you'll see a lot of musicians will improve like their keyboard playing when they could compare it to a quantized value. So, so not necessarily percentage based, but you can say, hey, you want this to be, if you wanted it to be dead perfect, you'd want to see a flat line here. And where do we see these little fluctuations go? So you could just say, so we see, okay, there's going to be some changes here. Maybe there's a fill. So before going into the chorus, and maybe you wanted to speed up a little bit there, you could see and kind of do an analysis of the drum performance right there, Ted. So I think if you showed that to a drummer, they would have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. All right, so we have Bruce checking in from Simi Valley, California. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Tone Vision, Ton Studio checking in. All right, Lucas asks, I was wondering if there was a way to make a macro to open any kind of event, instrument, audio, MIDI in a full-size window. So it really depends on whatever the last particular setting was, but there is keyboard shortcuts that you could set for this. So if I go to this project, right, and I'll revert it quickly here. So I think since Cubase 8, when we kind of created the lower zone, we have the capabilities to, by default, when we double click to go into, the lower zone editor as opposed to like a standalone editor. So if I double click here, we could go into the lower zone editor for samples. But if we go to preferences and under editors, we can say double click opens editor in window, and then we could open editor commands in lower zone. So if we wanted to hit like Control E, so now when I double click, it'll go into a separate window. And if that editor window is full screen, you could do that. So if I double click on an audio event on a sample, we could double click the sample editor is now in full screen. So you could set keyboard shortcuts for that or set the preference so you don't have to make a macro to do it. And again, that would be under Cubase or under your preferences, double click opens in lower zone, and a key command opens in a separate window. So you could set up key commands for that so that as you hit like Control E, that would automatically take you to a lower zone, or double clicking can take it into full screen. So let me know if that works. All right, wonderful to see Daniela Tocan on. She's saying, hello guys, no Valentine's. So we've had a lot of Valentine's wishes already. So all right, we have Patrick Emmanuel A on live. So great you can make it. And we see Nick as well. All right, Benny asks a question. Is it possible to set up so that a vocal track always becomes, for example, blue, bass, red, and so on, Cubase 12 Pro? So a lot of people that want that will just kind of set up a template so that, when you're working on bass or a track preset, I believe would carry the color over. But let's say if I have a track here called bass, let's go to, we could set up Project Logical Editor presets for this. So we could say, I want to transform, we'll say, media type, the container type is a track. And we'll say name contains bass. All right, and then we want to, so transform, name contains bass, vocal, whatever, and then you could say set color. So now every track I want to set to a fixed value. I want my basses to be blue. So I could now come over here, hit apply, and that would automatically change that particular track. So at this point, you could just have these different values set for different instruments. And if you wanted to do this, you could have up to 3 different scenarios within one particular logical editor preset. You could take multiple logical editor presets and put them into a macro if you wanted to. So that's one way of doing it. Or if you're just kind of starting from a template, you could just have, your colors set up. And I know that, different people will have, very strong feelings, kick is always this color, bass is this color, vocal is always this color. So you could have it set up. All right, so we have Casey Dotson saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us. Tim Weinheimer. And Tim asks, is there any 70s disco string in any of the Steinberg libraries? So let's take a look. Probably like an ARP string ensemble. Used to have one of those in college. There's a good chance it might be in like Howling and Sonic SE. So that would be like a preset for an 80s string machine. So that would be kind of, let's try the 80s string ensemble. Hang on just one second. All right, so now if I just want to come here and kind of play, but maybe just the like the synth strings is probably, that's kind of very ARP string ensemble like. So, go to strings and then go to synth. And there's probably some other ones here. So, but those you could kind of tweak and get those to be kind of like old string synths from the 70s, Tim. So we see Nick asked, Greg, the Steinberg promotion page is empty. Any chance it may fill up tomorrow? So there's generally going to be promotions like going on at different times throughout. So I think we just ended the New Year, New Gear sale. But just kind of keep your eyes out, and we'll have some, there's always kind of promotions in the pipeline per se. All right, so Patrick asks, Greg, I've grouped in folder tracks like drums, pads, synths. I want to change same colors for tracks within the folder. Is there a way to assign the folder color to tracks inside the folder? All right, so let's give it a shot. I think the tracks will be independent, but let's see if we can get it to. So I think if I change this, it won't have any impact on that. So I think it's going to be independent, but let's see. If I select if I select the folder and the track, I could, just come over here and just have the colors selected like that. So let me know if that works for you. So. All right, so we're seeing, Memento says that it's plus 1 degree centigrade and sunny here. It's almost summer in Finland. So he's checking with Nick, see how weather is in Essex. All right, so we see Paul Grooveside says it's real useful. I didn't know any of those techniques. Thank you. So I wish I knew what it was because I'm so far behind already. All right, so we see from Jovanovic 3D says, I bought Nuendo. Greg, you're supposed to talk me out of this. I can barely handle Cubase. Anyway, thank you for the valuable live streams and happy Valentine's to the Cubase Nation from Slavonia. So enjoy your new program. Check out like the randomizers, like really slick for a lot of things. All right, so we have a question. It was recorded live piano via MIDI, but I forgot to change the tempo in its default to 120 record without the metronome. How can I know the tempo of the piano player? How can I set up the correct tempo? All right. Okay, so just like we did the tempo detection earlier on the audio source. Okay, so let's say we have, so let's say there's not, just as you described, 120 beats a minute. So what I want to do is, again, select the event, get a project, to tempo detection, analyze. And then we can know the tempo of what the piano player has done. So once again, select the event, go to project, tempo detection, and hit analyze, and then that will tell you the tempo, the correct tempo that the piano player played. All right, so we see Mark Rabin's dog Stella says hi, and woof, that's good. We're always happy when Stella's happy. All right, so from Tone Vision Ton Studio. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to edit events differently in a grouped folder? Every time when edits are not the same, the folder group functions don't work anymore would help a lot. So let's jump back to this project, and I'll just make the colors less ugly. Sorry about that. Okay, so, if we have group, so let's say I have my folder track here and I have group editing, that now when I adjust, different edits on tracks, that they are grouped together. So if I do fade in, fade out, and I'm just going to read this. Okay, so if I now want to, take just one particular event here, and now let's say I do group editing on it, so at that point, we could see that as we do, and, we could have the edits be independent by disabling group editing, or have them, be kind of, proportional based on your particular edits. So, we could do, like if I wanted to match these fades, I could now select these events, and I'll just hold down Control, and then you could adjust kind of the fades to match. So, you could have it do, group editing or be independent, but realize that, if you've done, independent edits and then do group edits, that they may be conflicting with each other, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast with that. So. All right, so we have a question from DL White. Hi, Greg. I have an OMF project at 48K, 24-bit. I want to use the CD of the songs for a reference in the project. They play at different speeds, pitches. How can I conform the CD audio and maintain pitch? So really what you just need to do is, let's jump back. All right, so let's say I have this project here, and this is at 44.1. All right, so let's go ahead and just listen to, just so we get a frame of the pitch. So let's try going to Media Bay. Or not Media Bay, but the pool rather. Sorry, go to Media to Pool window. Let's get to the audio. So I want to take this file and let's convert files, and let's switch it. So we're currently, I just want to make sure that I'm at. All right, so we do this. We're at 44.1. So let's go back to our pool. And we can see our sample rates here. So is this new file? So I want to just drag in this file. So all you have to do is, so to do that with, to get that to fit into your project, try just selecting it. And because I didn't change the sample rate, that should work for you. So let's say I'm going to do a new project. And I'm going to do this project at 48K. So I'll come here to my project setup, and let's set it to 48. We'll just test to make sure the pitch isn't changed when we drag and drop this file in. Yeah, so now in the project at the same rate. So all you have to do is take the CD audio file and, go to the pool under media and take the file and convert files and switch the sample rate, and then it will play back at the right pitch for you. All right, so we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. All right, so just see from Basil says I want the level to visibly drop. So let me know, like, if you want to see, like the amplitude. So if you want the level to visually drop, you could adjust the gain there. So that's one way to have the level kind of visibly drop. If you want to see it in the amplitude of the waveform. All right, so we have PZ136, wishing everyone a happy Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. All right, Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. 40-mile-per-hour winds there, gusting to 55 miles per hour. It's pretty fast. All right, so we see Mark Rabin says he purchased a new keyboard, MPK 225. Does that integrate well with Cubase Pro 12? So let me see if it's on, like, if we get to the MIDI remote, if that's one of the ones that's kind of built in. So you could probably, so there's an MK325, but you could, as long as it transmits MIDI, you can make your own MIDI controllers pretty easily with it. So as long as it transmits MIDI, it all kind of works very well with Cubase. All right, so we see from DL White, is there a Cubase keyboard like with Final Cut, Avid, etc.? So is it like, if you mean a computer QWERTY keyboard, like what you type in, there are companies that make them. I don't know off the top of my hand. I kind of know the keyboard shortcuts, and customize them. But I've seen people run them and have them. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. Hang on one second, I'm going to clear my throat. All right, sorry about that. All right, just reading through comments. All right, Raven Crescent asks, basic question. When I do automate a volume automation or an instrument track, it sets the volume, but then when I try to mix or master, I can't even change the volume of the track. It's on read. So it could be that you just have to write automation again. So it's not going to, it'll revert to the particular track. So let's come over here. Okay, so let's go to, let's say it's bass track, and we're going to automate. So let's say, just jump to the fader here. So I'm going to choose to automate. So we're going to click on W to write the automation. I'll just kind of zoom. So let's say we have our automation here. So now when we stop, read is turned on. So let's say as we come over here, I go to adjust it. It's going to just go back to where the automation value is at that particular moment in time. So if I wanted to change that, I could just write the automation. So I could write new automation in, or we could just click on the bottom lower left hand corner of the track, you'll see the automation here. So if you want it to be softer or louder, you could just edit the automation. But if you want to change the automation, you could, just write additional automation because it's following what the automation points are. So if you wanted that to be, overall louder, softer. So as my cursor is here, I drop it, you'll see that as I go up and down the automation is showing where it is at that position, that goes up proportionally. So if you wanted to, take the automation curve, the contour of the automation, and overall raise it, you could do that within the automation lane. And again, we could just open that by clicking in the lower left-hand corner of the track, or just write new automation. And then because the program is, you told it to be at this volume level at this time, and the program is just following what you told it to do. So you could write additional automation or edit the automation to raise and lower it up. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so Jay from Secret Studios asked, would you be so kind as you offered to, one, select all audio events in a project? Okay, so the project logical editor preset. So let me just do events here where we have MIDI and audio simultaneously in a project. Okay, so if we want to select all audio within the project, we'll go to our project logical editor, go to setup, we're going to choose select, and we'll say our media type is equal to audio, and that will select all of the audio events, and the MIDI events are not selected. So if I wanted to switch this to MIDI, we'll see that this MIDI will get selected and all of the audio is not selected. Now let's say if we want to do this within a folder, okay, I think these are all, okay, so these audio events are within this folder here. So if we close this folder, okay, so let's go back to our project logical editor. Okay, so we want to choose audio, and I think that we could set this for under property to parent. Property is set to parent object is selected. So let's say, okay, so that's selecting all of the audio tracks within Okay, so we're going to say media type is equal to audio, and then property is set to parent object is selected. So I'm going to select the folder track here. All right, and let's choose select all unselected tracks. All right, so we'll come over here to edit. select all on tracks. Okay, so I will say I just have this folder selected. Then, so we could do media type is equal to audio, property is set to parent object is selected. So the parent object here is the folder. And then edit, select all on tracks, and that will select all of the audio on within the folder. All right, so we see from PJ 1 MB says, whoa, nice. So I love these reactions after I have no context of what it was, but all right, reading through comments here. So thanks for all the great questions. And my chat field just jumped. All right, so I think I'm back in the neighborhood where I was. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you on. All right, so Mike Weiser asks, question, is there a quicker way to add multiple steps for custom macros? Example, copying, pasting multiple commands without having to find or retype a key command, something Steinberg could update? So, yeah, I mean, so I'm not sure, if one of the things that, so figure that, you're going to add each element within a macro independently. If you find that you're, adding like these same strings, it's like, okay, I want to select all, do this, 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 and this, and I'm doing this within like 3 or 4 macros. You could have like 3 or 4 steps and save that as a macro and run the macro within the macro if you wanted to. But, the macros can be, are generally kind of built step by step. But if you had like a set number of commands that you were using, let's say for multiple functions in a particular macro, and you wanted to have like a variation, like I want to do this to all MIDI tracks named drums. I want to do this, but to the same function to all MIDI tracks named bass, all MIDI tracks piano, all MIDI tracks strings. You could save those particular, the common elements as a macro and have the macro within a macro if needed. So, but if you want to email me an example, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, you see Jeff Sabelski says, thank goodness no Cubase user ever asks me to make low note speak easier with my reed knife. So it'll happen now. You just jinxed yourself, Jeff. All right, wonderful to see Randy Lee on. So from Walter Till says, "Hi Greg, is there a way not to always see the offline process, especially when I have shortcuts?" All right, so I think that you're only going to see. So I'm not sure if you're doing processing. So if you don't have so if you don't have a particular, so let's say, okay, I want to come over here. Let's do pitch shift. I want to do this. So you're not going to necessarily see. So if we have the direct offline process open, we could see the process here. And if you wanted to select different tracks, but I guess if you didn't want to see it, that you would, not have the window open. But I'm afraid I might be misunderstanding your question. So I don't know if you don't have if you don't have the direct offline process window open, then it won't necessarily be visible. And then you won't always see the offline process. So, but, if you have any more information to make it clearer, if I'm misunderstanding, please let me know. See, got yours just about the macro says, he was just indicating maybe like a learn function where it just follows your every move and then could repeat it. That would be a better way to do it. But realize everyone's learn function may be slightly different, depending on different screen positions. But I'll pass it along as kind of as a suggestion. All right, so we see from Randy Lee, "Hey Greg, is there a mastering template in Cubase? Thanks." So I think that there is one, so let's go to a new project. And if you go just to your stereo mastering template, you could access it right here. So from the Steinberg Hub, just go to the mastering tab, and then you can see the mastering template and start that off right directly from there. See, Paul Grusai says, "This is a very helpful session. There's such a lot of valuable information that I hadn't known about before." Yeah, I think it's kind of what's great about this format is you can, learn from questions that you haven't thought to ask yet from that other people are asking. All right, so we see from Basil says, "Hey Greg, Basil, Simon here in Yorkshire, UK. I have an annoying issue. Audio channel volume level doesn't change when pulling down the fader. Volume changes though. How do I stop it, please?" So if I'm here, let's say, okay, I'm just going to grab this. All right, so let's say we have our drum loop going on. So I'm not sure if you're grabbing a physical fader or if you're just grabbing this. Let's say I'll just put it into loop. So if you grab this fader and there's no automation, it will change the volume of the drum loop. And if we're on our mix console, we get the same thing. So it says the volume level display doesn't change when pulling down the fader. Volume changes though. How do I stop it? So I'm not sure if the volume level here, so if it's the meters, so let's say, if you're looking at this and you pull it down and the meters are still playing, that could be just the meter position. So if we go to your channel global meter settings, if this is set to input and I pull it down, that we still see the levels. So if that's the case, right click on the meter and right click and you'll see global meter settings and change the meter position to post panner or post fader. So now as we drop it, we will see that the volume level will change based on this and not just the input source. So let me know if that's what you're running into, Basil, or let me know if I'm completely misunderstanding. All right, so Simon just says, thank you very much for your efforts. I'm glad to help. All right, so Mike Weiser asks, how do you snap the beginning of an event to the end of a last event to fill in gaps, trying to create a macro to align drum samples? Okay, so I think, let's say if we do, let me just make a copy of a couple of audio events here. So I think, let's say if we switch our grid level here to events, we could, let's see, we could have the grid kind of based on events, but if you want to do it like in a macro, I'll just switch my grid back. All right, so let's say if I'm here, let's move our cursor. So I'm going to hit N. So let's build our macro. Okay, so let's say I want to go to N. And let's so let's add that. All right, so we can go here. Okay. All right, just want to check my. So I'm just going to hit navigate right. And let's move that up. All right, so let's say if I start at the end of this particular event, and what I wanted to do is to like hit my right arrow to select the event. Let's see if I need to do that twice. All right, so let's see if all right, so what I want to do is, let's say I'm here, I hit the, let's say I have nothing selected, I'm at the end, so I want to go right arrow, and then let's remove this. Okay, so I'm going to move the end of the event here. Okay, so it looks like that works. Now set it up for the next stage. So I'm going to come here. So let's get to edit. Let's say macros. All right, so with that selected, so I'm just have the right edge selected. We want to move that over. So we'll run the macro again, and we'll see this set up. All right, so what I want to do now is at that point, let's add 2 commands. And I just let's see if I take this next one. All right, so let me just try this a little bit. Okay, so let's see if we get this to work. So let's come over here. Let's run the macro. And see if it works going forward here. Right, so it works for the first one. Let me just set up my keyboard shortcut so I could just trigger it from my MIDI remote here quickly. All right, and so we have that macro assigned to the mapping assistant. So let's say if I'm here, all right. So let me just check the beginning of this, and then if I don't get it, then I'll work on it after the live stream. But I think it's close. And see what happens if I remove this. All right, I'm just going to duplicate this and see what happens if I remove the very first one. Okay, so all right, so let's say the first time. All right, so let's say if I'll just put my cursor here at the start. And let's see if I do a second one without the first one, so let's say. Yeah, so I get the first one to work, but we just check one more time to see if there's anything that just kind of jumps out to me with where the position is. So we run the macro from the MIDI remote. I'll play around with it some more. So if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, hopefully we could show it on Friday's live stream. But I think we're pretty close to it. I'm not sure why the second one is behaving differently with that, but I'll see if I can get it sorted out. All right, I may have lost some questions. Sorry about that. So if after that, sorry, my chat field lost some questions. So if I forgot your question, please feel free to ask it again. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Madge Deeper's on. So wonderful to see you on. Glad you could join us today. All right, so we have, hi Greg. I'm sure you've done it a million times here, but a demo of all the best features of the drum editor would be great. I'm far too ignorant of its nifty features. Right. So when kind of, working with the drum editor, so some things that are kind of unique about it, if you have, and let me just go ahead and drag a drum pattern over quickly. So okay, so when you go to look at it within the drum editor, some unique things that we could do in the drum editor. So let's say we have, lots of different drum editors. So one of the cool things about the drum editor is one that the pitch doesn't really matter. It's not as critical. But when working with the drum editor, we could see, our different sounds, and we could type in different names for each of these sounds. As we kind of scroll over, if we have a drum map that's selected for a particular instrument, so let's say we could see a drum map, and that would be like the list of all of the different drum sounds. So let's say we have a drum map. We'll start with like a general MIDI. We could see, what each of these, you could audition what each of the different sounds are. If we have sounds that, you've recorded all your different sounds, and we have like, one sound that's kind of lurking at the bottom here, we have different views. So we could say show, only drum sounds that have events, so I don't have to see all the blank drum channels. And we could also say, okay, show drum sounds in use by the instrument. So if you have like, an extra 32 channels, we could also, if you wanted to reverse the drum sound, so your kick is on the bottom as opposed to the top, we could do stuff like that. Now, working with the drum editor, some things that make it truly unique is one, a lot of times when we go to look at like our different events, let's say in a key editor, sometimes determining velocity, when we have multiple drums that are like a kick and a hi-hat that are playing at the same time, if you wanted to adjust the velocity of one, it could be hard to edit the particular velocity. But within the drum editor, here we could just see the velocity only of the selected lanes. Once we have this over, we could choose to have, let's say, if you get drums from someone else and all of a sudden their hi-hat is triggering a floor tom on your MIDI drum set, you could come over here and change the out note of the particular drum notes. Or you could have these go to multiple different devices on multiple MIDI channels. So you could have a kick coming from, Groove Agent, a hi-hat from Halion, a snare coming from Retrolog, and you could have multiple destinations for all of your different devices right here. As we go to enter in data, we'll have kind of our default edit mode. So let's say, if I wanted to put in 16th notes, we can see kind of our snap. And as we draw in notes, we could have these be 16ths. If I wanted these to be 8th note triplets on this as I paint in, and I wanted this to be dotted quarter notes, at that point we could just come over and see all of your different quantize options as you work. So just to be able to edit kind of your velocities very easily for each drum sound makes it kind of like a lot of stuff that you could do in a drum editor very fast with that. All right. All right, so DL White says he mentioned something about plugins not using power when there is no audio playing through the channel. I can't remember the setting. So if you want to not have plugins like VST3 plugins do processing if it's not doing anything, you go to Preferences and choose VST and go to Plugins, and there's the preference here for Suspend VST3 plugin processing when no audio signals are received. So you could just turn that on and off right there. All right. All right, just reading through comments. I'm sorry if I missed some questions, but if you think I missed your question that was kind of after that particular topic, feel free to ask it again. All right, so you see a question from Mike Rivera. He just asked, is there a reason why I lost all my drum sounds when I opened a track I made a month ago? Drums were done with Groove Agent. Thank you. So, one is as you're doing it, if you open up the instrument itself, see if you have sounds when you click on the pads. And if you have sounds that are there when you're clicking on pads, we know that, the instrument is finding those particular instruments. So those samples are loading up with the kit. If that's the case and you're playing back and you don't see anything, make sure that, it's set to the correct MIDI output port. So you should see like Groove Agent SE. You should see that it's on the different MIDI channel. So if I play this, you may get different results depending on MIDI channel. But, first check to see if, the samples are loading in as expected, and then check your MIDI output routing or that, and also if you double click, do you see the drum events in the editor? So if there's MIDI data there, make sure that the MIDI is being sent out to the instrument and make sure that the instrument has the sounds loaded. And there's probably just one of those elements that's not connecting. All right. So we see from Tim Weinheimer says, Greg, I was trying to download a MIDI Sade song off Chordified, which is a song learning program in Windows Online. It opens a media player. Thanks for trying to get it into Cubase. Thanks. So if you have, just a MIDI file, so if it's, and I realize that there may be kind of first part of the question, but if you go to, import MIDI file, you could just wherever your file is downloaded from, and you could choose to create a new project or merge it into. So if I just say, okay, let's come over here and I wanted to, merge the MIDI file, here's like the MIDI information. We could just do it in the project, but let me know if I kind of, if that makes sense, and I may be missing. Okay, so we see clarification from Walter Till says, hi, I wanted to ask if it's possible to automatically hide the offline process window. It always pops up. If I use a shortcut for process, I do not need to see the op window. All right, so let's say if we're here and we just do a quick process. Okay, so if I want to see that, so if you don't need to, see the particular window, so a lot of them, will involve kind of, settings, so which is why it kind of pops up by default. So I don't know a way to hide that. If you're doing stuff like, fades as well, if you have like your cursor, like over particular events, you could hit like the A key and that will do like, fade to the range. But a lot of functions, there will be, settings and parameters to adjust. So let's say if I just come here and do a reverse, let's see if that pulls up the offline process. That may be one. So you see like an offline process without parameters, the window doesn't show up for that. So that's probably the intention. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelski's got a new Android phone, and now he can start using Cubasis. So yeah, I run Cubasis on my Samsung phone. So keep wanting to get a long flight so I could do a project. Okay, read through. All right, so we see Greg, might you demo using Project Logical Editor how we may select all imported audio and MIDI files in a project we are beginning, and 2, to copy them to a new folder labeled originals, deactivate originals. Okay. Okay, so let's see if we could create this real quick. Sorry that I lost people's questions. I feel bad about that, but please feel free to ask your questions again. All right, so let's say we have a number of audio tracks here. Okay, so let's say we have all of this, so we want to okay, so we want to copy these to a new folder. Okay, so let's come over to just thinking of ways of approaching this. All right, so let's just... Okay, so let's say if I come here, okay, so let's see. So I'm selecting all, then I'm setting the preferences for, and this could matter, like, so we go editing, that event selection, track selection follows event selection. So I don't know if you have that enabled or not. So let's come over. Okay, so we have that. So let's say media type is, or container type is folder track. And we will set a name. All right, we'll call it originals. Let's try replace. All right, so let me just... All right, so let's deactivate or disable, enable track. And let's set our preferences to, and we'll revert the preference. Track selection follows event selection. Okay, so let's come over and it's going to deactivate this particular preference to start with. Okay, so I have all these tracks. So we're going to do edit, select all. We're going to switch, toggle the state of that preference. We're going to add tracks to folder. We're going to take the folder track. We're going to generate a name called originals. Then we're going to disable all of the tracks and can revert our process, our preference back. So let's see if this works. And we'll hit apply. And it looks like that did work. So give that a shot. I'm just going to save this. So once again, edit, select all, preferences, editing, track selection follows event selection. Then we're going to add all the tracks to a folder as pre-commands. that folder. We're going to take the folder track, rename it to originals. We're going to disable all the tracks and then reset that editing preference again. So let me know if that helps, Jay. All right. All right, so we see Michael Pierce will be back in a little bit. All right. So you just see from Jay, can Cubase Nuendo natively send CV commands out to synths and other devices? So I don't know much about CV, so I know, so I mean, I don't think that it's really well suited for it, but I think it also could depend on your audio interface if it's DC coupled to actually send a CV, but I'll do some more research on it. See, Gareth in the drum editor likes the velocity to selected lanes and individual snap is big help. So, all right. So we see Greg. Can Cubase strip out silence between the hits on live drums to remove bleed? So yeah. So it's good. Take a look. And once again, I did lose some questions in my chat field, and if you think I missed your question, please re-enter it again. So let's say, like I have like my toms here. So if we listen to my tom track and we solo the toms. So let's say. So if I wanted to, basically just take that and we go to audio to processes or audio to advanced. I'm sorry, we would just come here and you could do a detect silence and we could set a particular threshold. So you could say, okay, I really only want like those things. So then we could analyze and just come over here and strip to silence. So now as we do it, we're only going to, like that track will only play. So you could do it like that. You could also, if you wanted to use a noise gate to do it, you could come over and do an offline. You could just come over to plugins and say, okay, I just wanted to go to dynamics and let's go to gate, and we could say, okay, anything below minus 16.7 we could just get rid of as well. So you could do offline processing on gates or go to advanced and at that point choose strip silence or detect silence. So if you again go to audio, select the event and come over here to advanced, detect silence. So you can try that to get rid of unnecessary tracks. So you got yours. Says, I really like in the drum editor how you can hide all the empty notes. Really helps when you have a bunch of stuff triggering. Yeah. All right, so Simon asks, are these live streams regular? So yeah, we do them on Tuesdays and Fridays unless I have some travel obligation or vacation. But yeah, generally on Tuesdays and Fridays in about a month. So on March 17th, I think we actually have a live stream. That'll be since COVID started, kind of our 3-year anniversary. So, but yeah, we've been doing basically 2 a week since COVID started. So twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. And if you're in Germany or Central Europe, it's 7 p.m. See, Gareth might be moving to Montana, so your Spanish will be a good investment in education there. Just kidding. All right. All right, so we see from Thomas asks, is it possible to map the insert effects with the MIDI remote, or is it only possible with the 8 quick controls? Okay, so let's say I am here. I have a bass amp on, let's say as an insert. So I'm going to come here to under distortion, and let's load up my VST bass amp. And let's say I have a compressor on here. So let's get to our dynamics. Okay. And let's say a flanger. Why not? So we'll go to modulation and flanger. Okay. So let's say I want to map different parameters of different effects to my MIDI remote. So I'm going to come here to my MIDI remote. Let's switch I'm just going to come over here. Let's do an untitled page. So I want this to adjust my flanger. So I'm going to like the flanger rate. So when I come here, I want to adjust this rate. So I'm going to right click. And we'll say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. So I move the fader. All right, so now this fader is controlling my flanging time. I want my compression value here to be on fader 2. So again, right click, pick up for MIDI remote mapping, move the knob that you want it to do. All right, so I look at this. Fader 1 is controlling my delay time. Fader 2 is my threshold. And let's say fader 3 and 4, I want to come over and adjust parameters on the bass amp. So I want the gain. So right click. Let's adjust, apply the mapping. All right. And let's say I want to do like lows. Apply mapping, and let's say low mids. All right, so now, as I wanted to just come over here, so I can say my first fader, and we could see it switching here is controlling that. My threshold is controlling this. I have my gain and my EQ just being done. So you can control different plug-in parameters. And then if you say, okay, I really like this, you could actually just save this as a new mapping page if you wanted to. So you could use the MIDI remote, just to control your different parameters across different plugins very easily. So let me know if that helps. All right, and just a follow up to that, it says I have the Akai MIDI Max, which has 24 knobs with VSTI. That's no problem. They all go and remain saved. With the insert effects, only 8 quicks go, like quick controls that remain stored, so no more. So, but yeah, you could definitely kind of, map it out So at this point, once you have, like, I have my Korg Nano control. If you go to, like, the mapping assistant, we could take this particular in, this setup and just, add a new page or duplicate the page. So, you could just say, hit this button, it takes you to a mapping page, and then you're able to control, the plugins as you want. Go to a different mapping page. Your 8 faders could control, different parameters very easily. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay, so we see the Heartbreak Time Machine says, how do I record an audio click track? So there's really not a need to do it because Cubase can automatically render it. So let's say I want to do my click track between the left and right locators here. So I'm just going to snap my locators. So, and if I wanted to just hit the letter, like if I have an event selected, I could hit the letter P. And as we do this, we would just go to Project and go to Signature Track, and you can say, render audio click between left and right locators. And now that will automatically come directly to the bottom. And as we listen to it, we could just have the audio click track just rendered as an audio file. So that's what that audio file is. So you don't have to record it. You could just render it automatically in there. But again, by going to your project, to your signature track, and render MIDI click between locators, or render the audio click between the locators. See, Randy Lee says he wants a long flight just to get out of Texas for a while. So, yeah, I used to do like 120 flights a year. Now I do like 4. So, but it's been great to be home. All right, so we see a question from Gareth. Got another question regarding the drum editor. Is there an option to toggle default MIDI event open in drum / MIDI editor? So you could double click a MIDI event. Let me just go to a different project. Okay, so if you want to toggle the default behavior of drum track, to open in the drum editor. So let's say if I have this part, I could double click and it goes into the key editor. There's a preference. So if we come over here to editing, and I think it's under MIDI, or maybe under editors, our default MIDI editor will be the key editor. I could also have that set to the drum editor if I wanted to. So if I wanted to now double click, we could go into the drum editor. Now there's another preference, and you could choose whether you wanted to go to in-place editor, list editor, score editor. So, but if we go to editing and let's go to MIDI, let me see if it's that there is a use drum editor when drum map is assigned. So if that's the case, if I have a drum map, so let's say, okay, on this, I went into Groove Agent and I did my, import drum, create drum map from instrument. So if I have a drum map that's assigned to an instrument, now that the drum map is assigned, when I double click, that will automatically go into a drum editor. When I double click on a normal MIDI part, it will go into the key editor. So if there's a drum map that's assigned to the part, that will by default double click and go directly to the drum editor instead. Great comment from Jeff Sabelski. I saw some discussion of Frank Zappa earlier, but Jeff Sabelski's Zappa transcended PDQ Bach. So I was playing that for my son recently. The PDQ bot calling the sportscasters calling the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony first movement. So. All right. So we see question: is there a way to truly lock a track to prevent accidentally recording over the audio already recorded? I didn't realize I left the track armed and was off screen, so I recorded over it. So let's see if we go to our lock. Okay, let me just see if we come here to, if you record over it, unless you have specifically told it, to replace, the original audio file is always going to be underneath in that case. But let's see if I think there's a lock. Let me just. Okay, so let's see if we come over here. Yeah, so if you did record over it, you could just go to the bottom center and just, say, okay, just want to go right back, because it's basically just going to be on top, so anything that you recorded will just, reside on top of the original recording, and then you could just come over and, erase the kind of erroneous recording. But if there is, let's see if there's no bus assigned to it, I don't think that you can even arm the track for record. And let's see if if it's just locked, we can't. So let's say stereo in 1, and then let's see if the track is locked. So anytime that you do record, it will be just, over the event. So just coming and erasing the new recording, or even if you accidentally, you could always hit undo or just erase like your new recording. So let's say now that is locked here. So we'll just erase and your underlying event will still be there. Okay, so we see Benny just indicating he was probably a bit bad at explaining a situation. I mean, when I write in the track, song, bass, and so on, then it adds the color I selected. So I think let's come over here. It's not going to automatically do it for you. You could apply it through a logical editor preset. But let's say if I do a new project, and let's add an audio track, and we'll just call this vocal. And let's say vocal is always this color for you. Let's save this as a track preset and see if we could do this. So I'm going to right click, save track preset. We'll call it Benny. And let's see if the color is preserved in the track preset. So I'll just come over to, let's say, our media, and we'll go to user presets, track presets, audio. Yeah, so it looks like it's not going to be maintained in the track preset. So not automatically, but you could have a macro that automatically sets the colors as you want and assign that to a keyboard shortcut. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher on. Hope you're doing well. All right, reading through comments. We see that Gareth K. Music just says Susie Quattro is a goddess. So. All right, reading through comments. All right, reading through. All right, so Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. You see, got memories of his Fairlight because Gareth is using a pen and tablet. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped to me. So trying to find my spot here. Okay, so I think I'm back in close to where I was. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there any possibility to control the parameter of an EQ with the velocity of MIDI notes in a MIDI instrument to open or close a filter depending on the velocity with no automation? So a lot of times that's actually just going to be done within the instrument itself. So, you could set up, like I'm sure you could do it in Retrolog. So it's not necessarily like kind of the EQ, but, if you go to like the modulation matrix, you could say the source, we want, to be coming like LFO1 and to trigger that based upon velocity. So it's not necessarily a Cubase function, but often within the particular instrument and how you could control the LFOs and have, different, different functions for that. So you could have, as you hit, more velocity, you could open up the filter more. So, there's lots of patches in Retrolog that would do that for you automatically. So it's more based upon the instrument and how the instrument responds than how Cubase would send that. Okay, so Michael Teams just says he listens to some of these questions and realizes how dumb he is in Cubase. So no one's dumb, so. All right, so we have a question. I've got audio mixdown set to always ask if file already exists. It's not working. It just adds suffix. 01, 02, is this a known issue? So let's go ahead and Just set up a quick example here. So let's say we're going to add an audio track. All right. So let's come over here. So record the audio. Okay. Let's get to our export audio mixdown. All right, so say always asks. So let's say I want to give it a particular name. Make sure I spelled it the same way. All right. And we're going to put this into let me just put it into the all right, so I'll export audio mixdown again. So in here we get file exists already. Do you want to create a unique file name? Cancel, overwrite. So it seems like it worked on my end. So it didn't automatically do that. So when there's a conflict, but maybe there's I'm not sure if it's going to different names, but let me know if I did it differently than you did. So when I tried to save it, into the same location, then with the same file name, then I got the prompt after doing it. See, and Gareth says his export always creates a new file no matter what option I pick. So, but it seemed like it worked for me, but let me know if I did something different than you. You see that Pablo's new name is Tom Solo, so that's a good one. All right. All right, so Roger asked, can you show us how to create a sidechain effect in the opposite of ducking? Thanks. Okay, so do you want it to be louder when the source comes in? So I guess that would be the opposite of ducking. All right, so let me just take, I think I have, all right, so let's say if I wanted to do kind of a traditional ducking type of effect, let's go to, let's listen to this real quick, make sure it don't kill everyone volume-wise. So if I wanted that kick to duck the synth, so if you're not familiar with how to do that, it's a common question. I know, and then we'll see if we could do kind of the opposite of it. I will come to the inserts of this, go to the compressor, and let's set our sidechain source to our kick here. So now as we do this, we get kind of our ducking on the synth, but let's do, instead of a compressor, let's see if we could just do an expander, if that has ducking capabilities. All right, and we'll activate the side chain here. So, you could maybe use kind of, let's say, even maybe a maximizer. Let's see if that has sidechain. So you just kind of use let's see if the limiter has sidechain. Not all of them do. But yeah, try, maybe with the expander. So, play around maybe with the expander on that, and you could do a side chain, kind of do the kind of opposite of that. And you could probably also just see comment about frequency EQ. That would be a good choice as well. So, or even one other one that might be good. Let's go maybe Squasher or Razor. No sidechain there. I think Squasher has it. All right, so if we do something like this. So you get here more kind of gain changed there, but let's just set the output. And here, I think we could actually just set the individual side chains. Let's say so you could have independent sidechain inputs on it as well. So let's say just for this one, I wanted the output. So a couple of different ones you could utilize. So frequency would also be another choice. See, John Koskins just learning more crazy stuff today. See, Heartbreak Time Machine says 10 years ago he had to use Sonar's cow language to create keyboard shortcuts. So glad for Cubase in 2023. All right. See, Gareth is saying these live streams are infinitely more regular than British trains. So we see just from Damkeys, how sound looks more wide. So if you have like a mix and you wanted to see it visually, if it's kind of more wide, often kind of a typical. So let's say if we're looking at something like this, like maybe a phase might give you an indication of kind of width within a particular track. So say so if I wanted to see like phase relationships, Now, if I wanted to come to the actual mix console here, and let's say I put in kind of a imager plugin. So let's say now if I want to make stuff wider, we can see it visually. So if we want everything to be kind of, so if I wanted to increase the width of particular frequencies, we can see that kind of reflected into phase scope. So if I take the width down on all the frequency ranges, we'll see it get more vertical. So if you want to make it wider, you could use something like the Imager plugin. If you want to see how the sound looks wide, in the Supervision plugin, which is found, just go to Analyzer, and then you can see kind of the phase relationship directly there within the consoles as well. But if I misunderstood your question, let me know. All right, Gareth wants to remind everyone not to forget to whack the like button. All right, so we see, so a question from Graver Larson. How do you make that the preview of the gate is shown in the wave editor window? So let's say if you wanted to like take, let me just find, I'll just take this. So if we want to go to the editor, so if we go to audio to direct offline processing, and let's go ahead and select like the gate plugin. So we'll go to dynamics, and I'm not sure if this is kind of what you mean, where, you know, now that I select, just so if it's the gate that you're doing here, you could kind of see, you know, the changes that you make to the gate automatically appear. But if it was kind of more the visual window, that could be, and what we showed a little bit earlier is if we go to audio to advanced, and there's a detect silence function. And then if this is the window that you were talking about, then you could set the threshold. So this is found under audio, advanced, detect silence. And then you could kind of visually block stuff out and kind of get rid of unnecessary, you know, just audio that's not doing anything for you. Gareth is sharing my secret that I get tickled every time someone hits the like button. So I try to gate it out, but Gareth has caught me apparently. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of lemon custard ice cream. That sounds great. Thank you. It's very generous as always, and always appreciate it. All right, so we see from Jay from Connecticut says, watching you work is what I imagine it would have been like if Merlin had a YouTube channel to share information twice a week, or Camelot is grateful to you. Yeah, I remember doing a presentation at NAMM, and my friend Dana Teague, who at the time was like the distributor of Warwick basses, I think he's kind of retired now, but just wonderful guy. And he's just like, wow, watching you do a full demo at a NAMM show is like watching Picasso paint. It was one of the nicer compliments I got. So, but thank you for the kind words, Jay. All right. See some discussion of people have migrated away from the USB e-licenser. All right, still reading through questions. Thanks for all the great questions. All right. So we see question, any chance that Steinberg may make available an additional section in Steinberg downloads where we can download useful Project Logical Editor presets, macros, and other useful add-ons which you or others create? So generally, I know a lot of the presets that you get in, user presets, I had sent a bunch in. I think, most of them kind of made the cut per se. But, I think it might be better to include them in the program instead of like a different download site. So I'll share some of the recent ones that we've created with the Steinberg team and see if we can get them included in whenever there's like a new version or a new maintenance release. So. All right, so just see a question from Jeweler DeRocket. Thanks for being on. He says, I have an issue when recording a vocal on a certain level. I don't see the same signal level after it's printed in Cubase. Even if I back and forth pre and post on the mixer. All right, so it says recording a vocal on a certain level. I don't see the same signal level after it's printed in Cubase, even back and forth or pre and post. I'm not sure if it's, how you're seeing the input level. So if you see the input level from, let's say we go to the mix console and you look at the input channel here. So one way to test this would be to, just come over, I'll just do a new project here. You could test the channel pretty easily using like an oscillator test tone. So let's say on my input channel, I wanted to put, just put the volume down. So go to Tools and then go to Test Generator. So here we have like a 440 hertz, like an A to most people, and at minus 12 dB. So if we look at my mix console here, we'll see that our level is minus 12 dB. If I add an audio track, let's make a stereo audio track, then we should see the same level. So I see my input channel is generating minus 12 dB. The audio track is set to record. That's at minus 12 dB. And since I haven't adjusted the volume of that track, my output is at the same volume level. So one, make sure that you don't have plugins on a particular track, which could be, affecting the gain. But, this is an easy test. Just put a test tone oscillator. And again, you could find that under tools. So let's say on our input channel. So as we select the input channel, just put an oscillator on and see if you see any volume discrepancies. But here, I don't see any in Cubase. And that way, you can isolate it to, if you're seeing your level on the input channel different than here. So if I bring this channel down, we'll see that, and we'll see that reflect on the output. But if I just Control or Command click back up, we'll see that these are the same level. So let me know where you're seeing your input channel, if it's your input gain that you think isn't reflected, but this looks identical to me. So, but let me know. And that's a way to kind of isolate it to see if it's coming from a plugin or some setting on a particular channel. See, John Barry says, "Hi, Greg. Thanks for dealing with my questions last Friday." So that's what we do. So we just sit here and answer customer questions. Try to be very customer friendly. Okay, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, thank you about regarding the rendering audio click. So it's a nice, easy way to do it. See, Gareth is glad I don't have to travel. I can be with my family more. So I really enjoyed that, and being able to walk my son to the bus stop every day is just a joy. So we see from Jay to me, is it possible to import, export Project Logical Editor presets? Might you please demo if it is possible? So when you go to the Project Logical Editor presets, and they made this a bit easier for Project Logical and Logical Editor presets. So if you want to come here, let's say, okay, you go to the top, you could just say show presets location. And here we can see all of my Project Logical Editor user presets are found directly there, and all my Logical Editor presets are found here. And if people want my Logical Editor, Project Logical Editor presets, just email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'm happy to share them with you. And I think that they're also available on the Cubase Nation Discord to download. I may have some more. So if Jazz Dude, if you want to email me, I'd be happy to share the latest round if you wanted to include some other ones. All right, so we see Sarah Rossi checking in from Italy, and she asks, Greg, can you explain to me how group tracks and sends work, please? Okay. So what this is going to allow us to do is to kind of take an existing, like a number of different tracks, and send it to a different destination, and that destination may be a group, or we may want to send it to a destination and have an effect blend in. So functionally, they're very similar. So let's say I want to take all of my drum tracks here. And I think I've destroyed this song pretty good. Let me just revert it quickly. Okay. So I want to take all of my drums, and instead of moving each of these faders or processing like a compressor on each one of these tracks, I'm going to select all of my drum tracks, and let's send them to a group channel. So I'm going to right click, and we'll say group channel to selected tracks. So now I could adjust the volume, and I could have all of my drums being sent to this one group. Now, if I wanted to apply compression, Now, instead of having to do that on every single track, I could just apply it in, and let's say I want to go to my envelope shaper. So now everything is being sent to this one group. And I could EQ the group. Now what an effect send does is it often is going to be used so that we could have all of these tracks going to a particular effect, but at varying degrees. So I'm going to select all the channels again, and we'll say effects channel to selected channels. I'm going to choose a reverb. So now we'll go to our effect sends, and I'm going to select all of my tracks, and I'm just going to bring down the effect send. So let's just quickly activate Q-Link. So now I want to take my snare top, and I wanted more reverb. So these tracks are now feeding the reverb. And I could go to my effect channel here, so my reverb. So all of these tracks are going into this group. And I could have various tracks go into the reverb. So if I wanted no reverb on the kick and only reverb on the snare, we could now send this track. So in essence, a group doesn't necessarily, so we could have multiple tracks be sent to one single reverb. Now, if we wanted to put a reverb on our group channel, would it kind of functionally do the same thing? Yes. So very similar, but people, and we just try to follow kind of the paradigms and concepts that have been kind of laid out in mixing consoles that have been there for years and years, and try to be consistent with those ideologies and methods and workflows. So let me know if that's helpful, Sarah. All right, so what you see from Graham Witchers is when it comes to keys, it's Yamaha every time for him. The Motif series were way ahead of everything else at the time. And who could forget the trailblazing DX7? So, all right, so we have a question from Alessandro. Says, does Cubase have a MIDI effect to add randomness to MIDI? So, yeah, definitely. So let's come over to this project. So it's not necessarily an effect, but there's kind of multiple ways of doing this. So let's say, all right, let me just, my nonsensical drum part I programmed for Gareth here. Okay, so let's say we have this. If you go to MIDI modifiers, we could just right click if you don't see it there and go to MIDI modifiers. But here we could say, I want to go to random target, and we can say, okay, let's randomize the velocity. And we could say or if we wanted to randomize like position, yeah, we could set that a little tighter. So say like so let's say 10 and minus 10. So we could just, so there's all sorts of different kind of, so go into MIDI modifiers and you could randomize velocity, pitch, position, length of notes, and you could save all these as different presets to work with as well. And also within the logical, within the logical editor, we could do stuff like, okay, I want to take let's say I want to take my snares, and we look at my snare velocity. So I could say, let's go to the logical editor here, and we'll transform, and we'll say type is equal to note. Let's say I want it to be D1. And we could say what I want to do is to take value 2, which is the velocity, and we could say set two random values between 80 and 120. So now if we look at the velocity, I could just take and randomize the velocity or randomize the position to relative values, and we'll say between minus 10 and 10. So now we could ever so slightly shift the notes as well. So there's all sorts of great kind of random stuff that you could do via the MIDI modifiers or Project Logical Editor, or MIDI Logical Editor rather. All right, so you see got your, just says, that's a cool trick of drum app is assigned. I'll double click the drum editor, learn something new every time here. Awesome, so yeah. All right, so we have a question. Hi, how can I use a fader to change tempo? All right, so let's open up our tempo track here, and I think we go to, all right, so let's come over here. So I'm going to go into the tempo editor, and let's see if there's, okay, so we have a tempo recording function here. All right, and let's see. So if you go into the tempo editor, this is maybe a bit crude, but you could come over here and let's say you start recording, and then you could just kind of come over here and adjust the tempo values. So let me just activate the tempo map here. All right, so just Control T, I think opens the tempo editor. So open this up, and then, so say we play. And then, so now when we go to look at it, we could So you could just kind of edit the tempo. So try just clicking right here and then you could adjust, you could have a fader for recording the tempo. All right, so we have a question from Alessandro. Are you able to chop a sample in the sampler according to transient points to trigger different parts of a sampler on the piano roll? So yeah, certainly. So let's come back. We just revert this project here quickly. Okay, so let's say I want to just take a vocal file here. So let's say I want to take this, and we'll go to our sampler control, drop it in. All right, and let's go to slice, and we could turn it on. And then we could have this set by transient or grid, and we could kind of adjust sensitivity, or if you wanted to just kind of drag and drop. And now or if you're doing it with a drum loop, you can just come over here and again just turn on the slice and then really all you have to do is, you see this little MIDI, just drag that onto the project window, and then you could be able to manipulate it and take the original and do different vocal chops, drum loop chops, stuff like that. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so Paul Grooveside says, are these sessions recorded to watch later? So yeah, definitely. So there's probably almost 300 of these sessions. So if you go to like youtube.com/Cubase and then click on the live tab, you'll see kind of all of the live streams there. So there's hundreds of them available to watch. And you could also search for topics that have been covered in previous ones, just, by going to cubaseindex.com. All right, so we see, can I change the kilohertz at track render? So if you're rendering tracks, it's going to render it into the project, and that's why, and as you render a track, if you do a render in place function, so say we come over here to render in place, this would keep it at the same bit depth because you're rendering it into the same project. If my project here is currently set to 44.1 and I wanted to render at a different sample rate when we get to export audio mixdown, at this point we could choose different sample rates to export to. But a render in place will do it at the project sample rate so that it doesn't play back at a different pitch and speed. But the export audio mixdown is not necessarily contingent, and there we could set independent sample rates as opposed that are different than the project sample rate. All right, so my chat field just jumped. Sorry. right, so we see Jeff Sabelski's in rehearsals for first movement, Beethoven's fifth. You know, the third is always good for a bassist. It's the kind of standard audition piece for. All right, see Randy Lee has to scoot, so thanks for joining us. All right. All right, so we see question, is there a way to show automation over the MIDI or audio clip instead of on a separate channel? So it's not on a separate channel, it's actually on the clip. But when you get to automation, you know, because you could have maybe 50 things automated for a particular track. So if you wanted to look at multiple sources, but what you can do that a lot of people don't realize, so let's say we have automation here and you want it to be like really precise and you're looking at the waveform to do automation editing. One of the things that you can do is if you hit F6, you could go to settings and then there is a show data on tracks and then you could see the waveform directly here. But the automation is going to be underneath if it is like a MIDI part or MIDI event and we have MIDI CCs within the particular event. So let's say, okay, I have modulation data. And since this is actually in the event, we could see that the CC data would actually show up directly inside of the event for event display purposes. And there's preferences for that. But, you know, because you could have, you know, hundreds of automatable parameters within a particular track, that at that point, you know, if you're looking at 100, you know, automation lines on top, that's why it's kind of broken out to be a little easier. So let me know if that helps. Always one function key off on my keyboard. I sit down and get my muscle memory right. All right. All right, so we see I was trying to show my nephew time stretch of a beat and haven't done it since version 5, so didn't know how to do it in version 12. Embarrassing. All right, so really easy, and I think it worked the same way. In version 5, if you just want to change your sizing, your object selection tool, there's a sizing applies time stretch. So here you can say, I need this to fit into that amount of time. So you could just kind of stretch the particular event. So I need that to fit that amount of time. And you could just stretch it just like that. And that will do the time stretching for you. So just switch the mode to sizing applies time stretch and then just grab the bottom handles. All right, so we have a question. Can I load Cubase projects into Cubase? So yeah, once you have, there's a little Cubase project importer. So if I wanted to come over here, we'll say File to Import. And let's see if I have it. So yeah, you'll just say Import Cubase project. So you can just open up the particular Cubase project right there and kind of, you know, continue working on it as well. All right, so we see a question from Harry Olive. Would it be possible to create a volume automation with a logical editor on an audio track based on threshold / loudness? So, you know, we could do, you know, if I wanted to, you know, with a project logical editor, we could do stuff like, okay, I want to take the volume, you know, up or down by percentage or up and down by dB. But I don't think that there's a way that I know of to have it, you know, based on a threshold or loudness of a particular track to correlate those two. All right, so we see, so it says, Greg, I'm on Windows and was exporting MP3. Would that make a difference? So let me try, and I think this is with the export audio mix down. So let me just give it a shot and see if that makes a difference with the naming conventions. So let's say MP3. So we'll always ask. Okay, and okay, so we'll export the audio here, and let's export it again. All right. So yeah, so mine, I just get the file exist already. So it seems like WAV or MP3 doesn't make a difference for that. But let me know if I did something differently than you did. All right. All right, so we see, how do you insert time or add a bar instead of having to move the whole section of your arrangement? Okay, so I'll just show it on project here quickly. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. Hope everyone's learning a new tip or trick. All right, so we could do this with kind of range editing functions. So let's say if I have my range tool and I wanted to do it globally, I could hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. So let me just, or Control Command Shift. So I'm going to now come over here. So let's say I want to insert silence there. Just go to Edit to Range, and then you'll just see Insert Silence, and you can do Control or Command plus Shift plus E, and that will, whatever you have your selected range. So if you want to do it on, number of tracks, and then Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter E, and then you could just have everything kind of bumped over to add that particular amount of time. And if you have it just on particular tracks, like only want it on those selected tracks, you could do select it. But if you hold down Control or Command plus Shift, you could globally select, do a global range selection, and then Command Shift E, just like that. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have a question from Michael Pierce. It says, a quick question. You showed us last week how to show waveforms and automation lanes. Is there any way to do that with group tracks? If not, would be very handy at the end of a mix. So, technically the group doesn't have any audio in it per se, because, there's not an event to actually show. So what some people will do is render the group tracks, and so that they could see the automation at that point. But since there's not an actual event, the group is just kind of like listening and processing audio, but there's not an audio event to show the waveform. But what some people do, is if we take our drum group here. So let's say we add a group channel. I've seen some people that we're going to add a stereo group, and on the stereo group, let's add a supervision plugin. And I realize that this isn't necessarily synced with the timeline, and you could set this to, I think if we go to waveform, we could see wave scope. So as we would play, we could now let me please send all the tracks to this group. That would help. I hate when I mess up, and it's my fault. So, if you are kind of looking, so you could get an idea of what's going on audio-wise in a group. And I know it's not kind of tied directly there, but if we are doing processing on a group, and if we have automation going on in a group, we will see this automatically kind of reflect depending on if you're pre or post fader. So let me just come to my insert here. So now if I grab the fader, we'll see that kind of reflected. So, but so that's kind of a workaround. I know it's not ideal, but I know there's been some discussion of kind of rendering some type of image of it, but that waveform could change it depending on automation changes as well. So, but the group itself isn't a file. So if you rendered it, you could do it. But that's kind of the reasoning behind it, I think. All right, so we see from Jay Hatchie, says, hope all is well. Keep up the great work. That you're a legend. Thank you for the kind words. It's very humbling, but we just try to do a good job. All right, so we see, can I change the sample rate when the track channel is rendering from MIDI to audio? So you would have to, I think we covered that before, so not in render in place, but in the file export audio mixdown. So again, that way we don't have two sample rates, two different sample rates. So you don't want to render the file and have it play at a different sample rate. That's the thinking that could cause you a lot more, that could bite you later in your production process. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, decided a song was too long and cut 32 bars out of the middle. The question is how to do this without one at a time track edit. So just like we kind of did previously, I'm going to come over here, hold down Control or Command plus Shift, and say, okay, I want that done. And then I think it's just Control Shift X. So select your range of your 32 bars, then Control or Command plus Shift, then the letter X, and this will take everything that's here beyond this selected range and move it to the right. So just do just like that. So let me know if that helps, Michael. You could do it. You could do each track manually if you're getting paid by the hour. It's a great way to work, but a lot of us aren't in that situation. All right, so we see, is there any plugin that finds the mixing or frequency faults? So, it's kind of a very subjective thing, and frequency faults in some headphones are not apparent in other headphones, and different speakers are not mixing faults in another speaker. Frequencies aren't faults. There could be good or bad decisions, but, I'm sure that there's, people trying to market an AI thing that's going to make everything sound exactly the same. But there's nothing really that would, just say, these are problems, and automatically fix it in the file or within your mix. There's going to be analysis of like room correction. That's, that's probably the closest thing. And I think that would be maybe a legitimate approach to that. But all frequencies are beautiful in the same way. It's the combination of how those frequencies work with different elements that could cause the problem. So I don't think anything is really there that could show you, fix mixing problems, other than spending a lot of time getting it right. That would always be the best approach. All right, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine, just says he always forgets about the squasher. It's so underrated. So, yeah. All right. All right, so we see Jay Hatchie is looking for a 0 SL2 Novation controller hardware, like a MIDI remote script. And that he has a Korg Volca keys that he's willing to share. All right, so we have a question. What's the difference between set definition from tempo versus going to the end of the tempo track, grabbing the middle, and hitting Alt and drag all the points in the tempo track so they are equal? Okay, so let's take a look at this. Just okay, so when we have a tempo, so the difference is, so say I'm over here, I'm going to import a quick audio file. All right, so let's say now, so let's say we have, all right, so I'm going to do a tempo detection of this file here. So just to get tempo data in it. All right, so now we'll do our tempo detection. All right. Okay, so we have our tempo definition here. So we see our tempo. Now, so what the reason to have the function of, so if I grab all of my tempo information here, and then let's say, okay, we're going to grab the center, and we make all of our tempo changes tighter. The audio still plays at the same tempo. So let's make all the tempo changes wider. So that doesn't affect the playback of the original file. So say now I'll adjust. So it's still playing back at the same tempo. So the concept here is to, when we activate, so that changes the tempo, but the audio file doesn't really have any correlation of what the tempo is initially. So when we have audio files that vary in tempo, what we want to do is to select them And now we can see all this tempo metadata, like every beat a different tempo. And when we go to audio to advanced to set definition from tempo, what that's going to do is to take these tempo changes at every single beat and apply that metadata to the audio file. So now that that is done, if I wanted to select a number of tempo changes, say here, I want it to be slower. Or if I want to speed it up. So if I want to take all these and say, okay, now I want to make these tighter, I can make it tighter, and now the audio is reacting to the tempo changes. If I didn't do the set definition from tempo, then we wouldn't. Then the audio wouldn't respond to the tempo changes. So it's not kind of either or, they kind of work together so that the audio itself, so that we know what the tempo changes are of the audio file, and that we could do the tempo changes, and the audio that has multiple tempos will correlate to the edits in the tempo track. Garrett says Picassando. So. All right, and Gareth has sent in the first plugin request for Cubase 13, a degiggler. So. All right, so we see from Lewis, says, thanks for the answer, but I was more referring to my question about velocity in MIDI notes to automate third-party plugin parameters, not necessarily a filter. I continue my question just below. It says, in Bitwig, for example, there's a tool device you can assign a track, and then you can drag velocity parameter to anything in any plugin, basically. So the value of the velocity in the MIDI track affects the parameter at any given plugin. Is there something similar in Cubase? I can't replicate it. I'll think about it, but there's probably, maybe like the LFO tool. So let's say if I wanted to just go to a different project and see if we could do the LFO from velocity. All right, so let's get to MIDI inserts, and let's see if the auto LFO, if this works. So I think that we might be able to let's do it on a new MIDI track. Okay, so if we go to here, and I'm just going to enter in some drum notes. So we could do it with an LFO, but let's see if we could convert the velocity to LFO. So in a MIDI insert, so let's go to transformer and see if we could take type is equal to value 2, and then value 2 let me just see if there's a preset in here. Okay, so let's say we want to take all right, so if we want to come here, let's make this type is equal to note, and we'll say velocity is equal to 0. So let's so I think if we do this and then convert the velocity to the auto LFO, so let's say we want to turn this into controller 10. So let's see if this works. We'll see if this actually goes up and down. I'll play around with it, but I think we could take the velocity values and convert it to a controller and then use the LFO, the auto LFO tool to take that controller to modulate different parameters. But I'll play around with it and see if we could get it going for Friday's live stream. So, but it's a great question. Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate that. Know what you want to do now. All right, wonderful to see Pablo has made the live stream. Always is so great when Pablo is here. All right, so you see from Jeweler to Rocket, what's your approach with working with drum samples in Groove Agent, and how do you drop it back into the template after editing it in Groove Agent? So, if I have samples, inside of Groove Agent, so let's say I'm here and I just want to drag a sample to, different spots so we could trigger the sample accordingly like that. So you want to drop it back into the template after editing. So I'm not sure if you need to take the sample here and drop it to the audio file. So you could drag and drop in, but as far as taking the sample out, so if the question is about like taking the sample back into the project, you could You could, it doesn't do that, but you could drag and drop patterns into, into the project. So I'm not sure if it's with that or if you wanted to, export the kit with the samples, and then you could choose to export it into your project folder if you wanted to. So maybe Joel or DeRocket, if you could clarify, we can see if we can get it in. All right, everyone's happy that Pablo has joined us today. Whole Hot Mess group is online. All right, so we have a question. What's the differences between the project logical editor and the logical editor? So the logical editor, it's kind of, they're both kind of like, setup conditions. If this, then that. And the logical editor is where it kind of started. I think going back to Pro 24 even. That works, only with MIDI data. But when we want to work with automation, naming tracks, colorizing tracks, more kind of like project level criteria and project level edits, those at that point that's what the project logical editor's for. All right, so we see, can I use an external fader, external hardware fader to change the tempo? So it's not really designed for that. So you can move the slider with your mouse. You could do, I think if we come over, if you have an AI knob, let's see if we could do it with an AI knob. And go to our tempo track here. It doesn't even respond to AI knob, so it doesn't respond to a fader. So sorry about that. All right, I know we had some questions that were sent in. Let me get to those before we run out of time. Thank you, everyone, for such wonderful questions. Hope everyone's learned tips and tricks. And if you learned a new tip, make sure you do hit the like button. All right. So, all right. So we had a question: how to keep the markers in their position after changing tempo. Okay, so let's say I have a project. We'll do new project. Here, see, I'll just do it in here. So let's go to my marker track, and I'll just drop markers in. Okay, so we may notice that when we have markers and I go from 120 beats a minute and I change the tempo, that some of the markers may just kind of not stay at the same position. So as I adjust my tempo, the markers move. All right, so to alleviate this is because the marker track has linear and musical time bases. So, and you can see this little icon here. So when it's in musical mode, I could adjust the tempo. You see it at the bottom. I'm adjusting the tempo here. That the markers stay the same. Could they stay in their actual time position, or they stay based on the tempo position. And when we go to linear, now as I change the tempo, the markers shift positions. So, and if we don't see this particular icon for linear or musical mode, what you could do is right click and go to track control settings. And when we see toggle time base, that may be hidden by default. So at that point, just when we have the marker track selected, right click, track control settings, come over here and toggle time base, and then it will be visible, and then we could just set that to musical mode, and as we have tempo changes, the markers will stay on the particular beat. All right, so we have a question. Can Greg show how to set up a new sound card easily for Cubase Pro? Should I use preset and audio connections for the new sound card? Has more advanced and have more ins and outs? How will control room affect my cue, etc.? Can I easily switch between the new and old for different projects? So as soon as you come to your audio connections, we could, set up your inputs. So there'll be presets. So if you have 16 analog inputs, you could have presets for, 8 stereo inputs, or you could have 16 mono inputs or 16 mono outs, 8 stereo outs, 2, 7.1 outputs. So you could, but they're not really needed. But if you didn't want to come over here, you could, just manually add them in, so the presets aren't as critical. And I think that as you start working, with your control room, just kind of set it up once, and then you could save a preset for the control room, maybe your inputs and outputs for your older audio interface and your new audio interface. Once you have it configured, I would just simply, once you have it configured, say, okay, this is my, AXR4 interface control room. This is my UR24C control room settings, and save those as presets so that you could just easily recall them. Okay. All right, let me jump back to some more of the live questions. See how we're doing on time. All right, we're doing great. Thanks again for all the great questions from everyone. All right, so we see from Mark Rabin, just says, seems like with PA plugins, maybe Plugin Alliance, Megapack, my subscription expires, and I have to figure out what is happening every time, usually after a few panic attacks. Anyone else experience this? So, yeah, it's a problem with subscriptions. All of a sudden, your plugins, your projects don't work. All right, just reading through comments. Right. Let's see, Michael Pierce's mantra is all frequencies are beautiful. In the same way, it's the combination of them that could cause problems. That's well said. All right. You see, Nick says Google often eats his question if you ask, unless it's a stupid one, then it allows it. So you could always email Nick, so no problem. All right, so you see from Cubase X's set definition from tempo and adjusting the tempo track. Think I sort of get it. Yes, apply. Definitely from tempo. Always baffled by tempo changes, especially when multiple tracks, including MIDI and audio. So generally the MIDI, by default will follow tempo changes. And just like we were showing with the one track, you could select multiple tracks and embed that same tempo track data And that way they're all going to be kind of, much more accurate as you do tempo changes afterwards. Okay, reading through comments here. All right, so you see, hi, is there a way to flip polarity of a sample in the sample editor? And also, is there a way to clip inside sample editor? So if we have, let's say, our sample editor here, and let's go to process, I think we could just go to add process and invert phase. So we could just do it. So if you want to do it to all channels or just the left channel or just to the right channel. So we could just, do it just directly from there within the sample editor. And, so the sample editor, as far as clipping, I'm not sure if you wanted to, cut out a single part of the sample editor, but if you wanted to, it's reflecting kind of what you have edited. So if we are, let's say if we go into the sample editor here, we could adjust kind of the start and end range if you wanted to, but a lot of times for doing that type of work, either do it on the project window here. Those edits are often kind of better on the project window, or you could take these parts and go into what's called the part editor. So if I select these, we could say audio events to part, and now we could come over and, do cuts, directly just like that if you wanted to. So, but a lot of those parts, we could think of that as being maybe more of a hyper controlled, what edits we could do on the project window, but very similar. So we see a question from Joe from Rochester. Is there an easy way to turn a wave stereo drum loop into MIDI, a loop that contains kicks, snares, hi-hats? Thanks. So if you want to take, there's a couple of different approaches. One is if we have Groove Agent, and the Groove Agent SE is a little slicker for this, or the full version of Groove Agent has a function that's pretty cool for this. So if I wanted to take just go back to our original drum loop, and let me just add a full Groove Agent. So if I drag this onto a pad, we could go to slice, and then, we could create slices. And as we do this, so, we could just listen to, and it's going to slice up the audio. So it doesn't necessarily turn it into, and once we have this audio that's sliced up, it creates a pattern, and this pattern can be dragged out. Now, what the full version of Groove Agent has over other tools is the ability to classify different loops. So we could say these are all kicks, these are hi-hats, and this color is going to be snares. So, and then if you wanted to, you could pick, like if you wanted to play this, you could pick, I want to play this loop, but I only want that snare to play. So every time a snare plays, it's just going to be this one as opposed to that snare. But it doesn't kind of automatically just, give you multi-track drums. It's going to be kind of based on transients and slices. So great to have you on the live stream, Joe. Hope you're well. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer sending thanks again for all the great answers. Hope it's helpful for people. All right, and we see Bruce is going to join us on Friday. All right, so we see 133 likes. All right, thank you, everyone. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more that sneak in. 137 likes. That's great. Thank you, Gareth, for the update. All right, so I think we're at the end of questions. I'm sorry that I missed some questions. I'll see if I could get the velocity to LFO. I'll work on that over the next couple of days, and hopefully we can show it on the live stream on Friday. All right, so 138 likes. But we'll see. I'll wait another minute, see if anyone else has a question. All right, see the likes are getting up. All right, thank you so much. It's very generous. All right, and once again, if you're new to this, we do this on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So I believe that's 6 p.m. in London, 10 a.m. in California, 7 p.m. in Central Europe. So we'll see if there's any more that sneak in. All right, I'll wait another minute or so. And we'll, appreciate everyone spending your afternoon learning Cubase tips and tricks. See John Koskian thanking me and everyone, all the great minds in the live stream. And one of the things I'm doing also is every Tuesday there's like little short tutorial videos. So there's one posted today you could check out on the Cubase YouTube channel, and one posted last Tuesday. So we're trying to do those every week. So if you have comments on a little short video, feel free to let me know as well. All right. I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks, everyone, for all the great questions. We hope, again, everyone's learned tips and tricks. And thank you for all the great comments and compliments. And we will see everyone back on Friday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.